Hey, Bishop, I was looking through the grand jury report,
Sure.
and one of the things I noticed was a report on Jeffrey Polish. He was placed on an absence of leave of absence from 2010 to 2013 5 times. A couple of those, 2 of those happened when you were bishop. We know from the grand jury report that sometimes when he said leave of absence,
Sure.
it dealt with issues with people being placed in facilities because of allegations
Sure.
against him. Were there any allegations made against Mr. Polish while you were there, and was that why he was placed on leave of absence, or if not, why was he?
First of all, I'm a little uncomfortable really drilling into an individual case. But that being said, people do go on leaves of absence for lots of different reasons. Right now, I have a priest who's on a leave of absence for factors that have nothing to do with anything like child sexual abuse. In the case of Father Polish, my immediate response to your question is no. There were not prior allegations about it, and I have maintained a zero tolerance policy since I've been bishop. It's certainly one that was promoted by the bishop's charter that was promulgated in 2002, and that's been pretty much my mantra since I've been here.
Okay, can you say why he was on the leave of absence during those times under these, when you were bishop?
Personal reasons.
But it was not related to
No,
allegations?
absolutely
Okay.
not.
Is he still, the last we saw, he's still on leave of absence, is that still the case, the report showing that?
Jeffrey Polish?
Yes.
He's permanently removed from ministry.
Okay, so he's not still on it, okay. Was it defrocked?
Laicization?
Yeah,
No, he has not been laicized, but he is permanently removed from ministry.
okay. Okay, and also, when we're looking at the list, you had listed a couple of lay people in your list, but there are a couple that we noticed that aren't there, that we know from our files had been charged. One was Mark Maroney, the other was David Yaros, and the other was Richard Smith. Do you know why they're not on your list?
I can't speak to that. No.
Okay, I could provide you more information regarding them.
Sure.
Is that something you could look into?
Sure,
and see why they
absolutely,
weren't?
absolutely.
Because all of them were public cases, they were charged with crimes, and they're not on the list for some reason.
Okay, it certainly wouldn't have been by intention. I mean, obviously a list like that is pretty, as you look at it, the list that we provided for the public on the heels of the grand jury report, it was quite an extensive list that actually included more individuals than the Attorney General's report did. If anything, it's potential that if they should have been, and then it was an oversight, But I'd appreciate whatever information you want to pass.
Okay. You said on Friday that you've referred Timlin's case, Timlin, to the Diocese Review Board. What exactly is that review board going to be looking at? What's the purpose of it? What type of decision will they be making regarding him, and will you make that report public?
Well, first of all, I'll answer your first question, your last question first. I will indeed make that report public. The Diocesan Review Board is established in our diocese, as it is in every diocese, related to the Charter for the Protection of Youth and Young Adults that was promulgated by the U.S. Bishops' Conference. And the Independent Review Board in our diocese is made up of 5 individuals, 3 lay people, a religious sister, and a priest, with expertise in psychosexual struggles and realities, law enforcement, and the like. That board is established in every diocese to deal with situations where a priest is charged with inappropriate conduct. And it will give me recommendations for how I need to proceed with his case. I think you did reference this actually in the paper on Saturday, or I think it was Saturday morning, that either you or one of the people that you consulted with said that it seemed as though I was being innovative here. I think that was the word that was used by using the review board to look at Bishop Timlin's decisions. And I am. I am being somewhat innovative because Bishop Timlin didn't abuse any children. that would be the case for most individuals that I would bring to a review board consideration. But I wanted some objective lens into some of the decisions that he made that I thought would be helpful to me in making a decision going forward. And so I thought the best place for me to go would be to this group of experts with whom I'm comfortable dealing, who are extremely candid and direct in terms of their recommendations. And I felt it would give me an objective lens into some of the bishop's decisions.
But what are you going to use that for? What will that, you're asking him for this objective lens, look into it, but are you going to then use that to decide, like whether or not he should continue to take part in diocese functions? Precisely. So during the period of time where they're looking into this, and they have met several times already, okay, as you know from the statement that we issued on Friday, I have pulled authorization for Bishop Timlin to publicly represent the Diocese of Scranton at public events, liturgical and otherwise. What they will be looking at and the recommendation that they will be giving to me, that I can accept or not, will be whether or not going forward the bishop would be able to publicly represent the diocese or not. So it would really be an affirmation or not of his status right now during this investigation. Is that helpful? Yeah, I mean, you're just seeking a second set of eyes to help you make that determination on whether or not he'll be able to continue with dialysis and things.
But anything with regard to his canonical status, that would be left up to the Holy See.
Right, so they won't be making any recommendation to you as to whether or not you should make a recommendation to the Holy See relating to
They may do that. How far the Holy See would go in terms of accepting a possible recommendation from them would be beyond my ability to really comment on.
Okay. And if that review board comes back and says, we think that the Bishop Timlin should continue to be involved in diocesan functions, do you see any way that you could allow that? I mean, given the nature of the, some of the allegations and of cover-up there.
Well, I certainly have listened to the reactions of countless numbers of faithful with regard to some of the decisions that he made, but we'll leave that ultimate decision up to what I have to make once I get their recommendation.
The diocese waited until the grand jury report was issued to publicly release the names. Mm-hmm. I know he did release it to law enforcement prior to them.
Right.
And you've made a note that you included additional names on there. But my question is, I think one of the things that was said is that the reason that they didn't release it before the grand jury report is because you didn't want to interfere with the grand jury investigation. Mm-hmm. However, the diocese has known about these allegations for decades. I mean, why didn't we release these names in 1995 or 2000 or 2008? Why did we wait now until a grand jury came to do this?
Well, first of all, I can't speak to 2009 and 2008. I wasn't bishop at that time. I can speak to the period of time in which I was bishop, which I was installed as bishop in 2010. So it's about 8.5 years now. As when I became bishop, one of the most pressing things for me was to ensure that our children are safe. And I did that in a number of ways. I had 2 separate reviews of our entire files of clergy, okay? Both active and non-active, okay? And then a subsequent review of files of deceased priests. Every file that has been kept since the beginning of this diocese, we reviewed, okay? My purpose was twofold when I became bishop. My intention, number one, was to ensure that what my predecessors, Bishop Martino, and Bishop Timlin in particular, stated that they would do on the heels of the charter in 2002, i.e. remove every credibly accused priest from active ministry, I wanted to ensure that they did. I had no reason to think that they didn't, but when one's taking over in an organization as complicated as a diocese, I needed to eyeball that myself. I needed to see with my own two eyes that every priest who was ever accused credibly was removed from ministry. That was the first thing. And why did I want to do that? Number one, and first and foremostly, to protect children. To protect children, okay? Subsequent to that, I then began to compile a list of all accused clergy, credibly and non-credibly, okay, or unsubstantiated, let's say. That was submitted to every district attorney, as I mentioned and as you referenced, in our 11 counties before the grand jury began. We were seriously considering at that point releasing the list and making it public. And then in September of 2016, the grand jury was convened. I know that some of my colleagues felt that in the midst of the grand jury report, it was the appropriate time to release the list. I just felt that we wanted to wait then. Once the grand jury had convened, I felt it was better for us just to wait and release it in tandem with it.
You know, some of your critics have said, and just of the diocese in general, not you, that the church only released this because of the grand jury, and that if that had not happened, these lists would never have been released. So why didn't you release it in like 2012, 2013 when you had it?
Well, first of all, I just explained that when I became bishop, we reviewed files on several occasions. We compiled a list. If one might be able to imagine, that takes some level of time to review hundreds and hundreds of files with a fine-tooth comb. I was in the process of considering doing that. The fact of the matter is, it's released now, and people can look at it.
Well, are you saying that the list wasn't like complete until 2016 or 2018? Was it not complete before then?
It was certainly complete by 2018. I had submitted the list to the district attorneys in the early days of 2016. Mm-hmm. And it was on the heels of submitting it to all of our district attorneys. So law enforcement knew every person who was ever accused. Yeah. On the heels of that, we were considering a release, and then the grand jury report came out.
Right. Had the grand jury report never come out, would you still have released this list?
I likely probably would have gotten to that point, yes, because we were discussing that very seriously at the time in which the grand jury report was convened, when the grand jury was convened in September of 2016.
Okay. But in terms of, again, Bishop, I'm just not sure you answered my question as to why it took that long until 2016 or 2018 to release the report. Had you considered it like in 2014 or when you were bishop?
I think what I've shared was that as I became bishop in 2010, we very, very seriously addressed the issue of the safety of our children and the history of our priests. Hence, 2 thorough reviews of our files of active and inactive priests, and then a review of every file that I have here in the diocese since we began keeping files 150 years ago. Upon the review of those cases, we put this list together, and as time began to unfold, we considered, in addition to sharing it with law enforcement, to sharing it publicly. That certainly was something that was taking place in some of the dioceses in the United States. I know as recently as around that period of time, the bishop in Albany did it. I was very struck by the significance of that. I felt that it added to our transparency, and then the grand jury was convened.
Would you want to see dioceses across the nation release these lists, even if they haven't had an investigation, like a grand jury report?
At this juncture, yes. Yes.
Some of the people on the list, there was no information on them, particularly the ones that are in the grand jury report. And we addressed this a little bit. I think you said you didn't want to release salacious details. Some of the other dioceses have at least like general information. They'll include the nature of it, whether it was fondling or a child or sexual
Right.
harassment, and the number of victims. Would you reconsider adding some additional information now regarding those who are not in the grand jury report? And if so, what?
We had a goal, and the goal, I believe, really fulfills the need for us to be transparent. What was our goal? Our goal was different than the Attorney General. There were obviously a lot of different factors that led to the way and the nature in which he released his report. For me, and we began compiling this list, as I told you, before the grand jury came out. For me, so I had no idea of knowing what was going to be in that report by the Attorney General. But we had three goals, all under the umbrella of transparency. The first was to list the names of credibly accused priests. Why? To validate victims, so that victims would be able to see in black and white that the individual who abused them was listed and was recognized as a credibly accused offender. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing that was important to us was that we provide other potential victims that we might not know about with data that would confirm their recognition of what had happened to them and give them the opportunity to come forward. Hence, we released every assignment and the dates of those assignments for a given priest. And then the third thing that we wanted to include in that report was that we would protect the public. Hence, the last known address of this priest abuser. Hence, the status of that individual. And thirdly, whether they were alive or deceased.
Okay, you don't think it's necessary to include even just like general descriptions of some of the activity?
I think that our goal was achieved.
So I'm assuming then you're going to stick with that and not include any additional information?
At this juncture, yes.
Okay. We have information that about $3.7 million was paid out by the diocese in settlements.
Sure.
We've had some people ask where that money comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Is that primarily insurance, or is that come from the diocese funds?
Well, the 3.75, as you note, the lion's share of that, a $3 million court settlement in the Liberatore case, which was pretty well known and certainly documented in the newspaper. Those funds came from insurance. Okay, the other funds that were paid out in settlements would have likely have come from insurance as well. If something in terms of response, in terms of our support of victims, that wouldn't necessarily be covered by insurance. And in those instances where we have to provide support to a victim, because through psychological counseling, for which we provide that for them, that will typically not be covered by insurance, but would actually come probably from diocesan savings, and would be the way in which we would respond to that.
Okay. And there's some priests on the list. I mean, some of them will tell us what happened to them if they were removed from ministry or laicized. Some of them are still showing that they're on leave of absence. I think Reverend Boylan, for instance. While they're on leave of absence, are they still paid by the diocese?
No.
They're not paid while they're on leave of absence?
No.
Okay.
Technically, a priest is paid while he's on leave of absence. Let's say I have a heart attack and I need to go on a leave of absence. We provide that individual with a partial salary, somebody who's sick. But in the situation, and I am surprised that Father Boylan says leave of absence, because his situation has not yet apparently been resolved by the Holy See, just because of some of the technicalities of that particular case. But no priest who is excuse me. Let's back up here a little bit. If a priest is laicized, okay, and they are removed from ministry, they're no longer associated with the church, and so they are not given a salary, okay? Some of the priests that are on that list, and I don't have Father Boylan's at my fingertip right now, okay? But some of the priests who are on that list have been given by the Holy See a life of prayer and penance. Maybe you've seen that reference, okay? They haven't been laicized. They haven't voluntarily chosen to be laicized, and because of their age, they are given a life of prayer and penance. No longer allowed to present themselves as priests, no longer able to minister in a parish. In those instances, according to canon law and the Holy See, I do have to provide them with a minimal amount of resources for sustenance.
Okay, but if they were placed on a leave of absence while receiving treatment or while they were under investigation, they were still be...
The situation, if somebody was on a leave of absence, that sustenance would be the same as the person who's on a leave of prayer, on a prayer and penance.
Okay, and would you be able to check on Boylan for me to see what his status is afterwards?
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely. There's nothing secret about that. It's just,
Right.
that's not something that I have at my fingertips at the moment.
And then I want to ask you what it is, and I ask you to be specific as opposed to maybe speaking in generality.
Sure.
What it is that you think the church needs to do to restore trust and get past this. Any very specific things that you think you would like to see done.
First of all, I think the ability to restore an individual, to restore trust in the church. You asked me to be specific in terms of that. I don't think you restore trust through a single gesture. You certainly don't restore trust through a gimmick. You restore trust when people somehow see your words being reflected in your actions. I would like to think that an element of the trust that people would have in the church in general is to be able to look at where we are today, to understand the fact that, and you've heard this before, 93% of these cases occurred before 2002 and the charter. So as painful as the information is that was revealed in this report, I would like to think that people would find consoling and worthy of some level of trust what we have done on the heels of the charter. The fact that no accused priest, and they can look at every priest who was named publicly, because whenever a priest has been removed from their parish in my tenure, there's a media report and there's a conversation with the parish. I would hope that they'd be able to see, even with respect to the two individuals that you referenced in our conversation thus far, that those individuals are not back in ministry. That's the first and most important thing. And that we are continually training and trying to create as best we can safe environments for our people, and that we're responding as best we could to victims and their needs.
One of the issues, I'm trying to think of my last question here, excuse me. So you seem to be saying in restoring trust that to look at things you've already done and show that there's a commitment.
I think that we look at things that I've already done and ensure that as we move forward, we continue to refine and refocus our attention upon why we need to continually work at creating safe environments. People aren't going to trust me because I say, look, I'm Bishop Bambera, I'm one of you, I came from this diocese, you got to trust me. It's easy to say words, but somehow people have to see actions that reflect what I'm trying to convey is our assurance with regard to how we move forward to create safe environments for our children and for our people.
But how do you do that moving forward? Is there anything more that you can do? Anything additional steps that you can take?
I think we can. I think we can continue to assess what we're doing every year. Every diocese in the United States has to go through an audit by an independent outside firm that goes into our parishes, goes into our diocesan records to ensure that we have created safe environments for our children, to ensure that our volunteers and our staff are trained appropriately, and to ensure, and this is extremely important, that any new cases of allegations of sexual abuse are in fact treated in an appropriate way, reported to law enforcement, reported to Childline, communicated to the faithful in parishes via the media, and that we follow through in terms of what we say.
Do you support some of the suggestions in the grand jury report that called for removing the criminal statute of limitations and
Yes.
also the civil statute of limitations? Do you support both of those?
Absolutely, indeed, for the criminal statute of limitations. For the civil statute of limitations, we need to look at that very, very carefully. It's extremely complicated. It needs to be considered. It needs to be looked at. We need to engage organizations from around the state that are charged, like the church, with protecting children, and we need to ensure that in whatever decisions are made relative to statute of limitations, that all victims are treated in a fair and equitable way.
I'm trying to think where the other suggestions were. I think one was relating to confidentiality, but I believe that issue's already been resolved in terms
Yes.
of confidentiality agreements. You're saying they don't enforce
Right,
that.
right.
Okay, all right.
I think, Gary, we're getting close to our time, so
Yeah.
maybe one more?
Yeah. Last question. Let's make sure I got all these. Back in 1996, there was, I'm talking about the Liberator case. In 1996, you had written a letter to Bishop Timlin to raise some concerns regarding Liberator's behavior with Keir Bancroft and a couple other things. Nothing ultimately ever happened to him until quite some time later when he was charged. Do you think that you did enough at that point to address that situation, and do you wish you had done more?
At the time in which I wrote that letter, and the individuals that you indicated, they were of age. They were over 18 years of age. Okay, doesn't mean that the actions therefore weren't problematic or weren't immoral. Okay, but in that respect, I felt that I did everything that I could. It was an immoral action with somebody who was of age. I brought it forth, and I made note of it and passed that along to the appropriate individuals.